The chapel's stained-glass windows shattered the afternoon sun into rainbows that danced across the aisle like forbidden promises, but Alan's voice cracked the air like thunder. "I can't say I do without you knowing the blood on these vows," he said, his grip tightening on the microphone as 200 faces, family, friends, strangers, froze in their seats. In that heartbeat, the ghost of Camp Redemption clawed its way back from the grave, dragging Wayne's name into the light, a name no one in the room had uttered in 15 years. Alan's heart hammered against his ribs like a prisoner desperate for air, the kind of rhythm that had kept him alive through nights when surrender seemed sweeter than survival. He scanned the sea of tuxedos and gowns, landing on his mother in the front row, her pearls clutched like rosary beads, her eyes already welling with the tears she'd practiced in the mirror. Beside her sat Father Michael, the priest who'd baptized him, now presiding over this unholy union with a smile as brittle as autumn leaves. And there, at the end of the pew, half hidden in shadow, was Jamie, his brother, the one who'd sworn to protect him, the one whose betrayal had sealed the camp's gates behind Alan all those years ago. "I love you, Wayne," Alan continued, turning to the man beside him, whose hand trembled in his own. Wayne's eyes, those deep hazel pools that had first caught Alan's gaze across a barbed wire fence at Camp Redemption, held steady now, a lighthouse in the storm Alan was unleashing. Wayne squeezed his fingers, a silent anchor, but Alan pressed on, the words spilling like confession after too long in silence. "But before we bind our lives, I have to unbind the lie that's chained me since I was 17. The lie that sent me to hell disguised as heaven, where they tried to pray the gay away, and where someone paid the ultimate price for my escape." A murmur rippled through the crowd, silk dresses rustling like whispers of scandal. His Aunt Clara gasped, fanning herself with the program that boldly declared Alan and Wayne forever united. Forever. The word tasted like ash in Alan's mouth, a mockery of the eternity they'd stolen from him back then. He could feel the weight of it all crashing down, the floral arches sagging under invisible pressure, the organist's fingers hovering uncertainly over the keys, waiting for the cue to flee into Mendelssohn or something safer. It had started in the sticky summer of 2010, in the sprawling suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, where magnolias bloomed as white and pure as the Southern Baptist ideals his family clung to like kudzu. Alan was 17, gangly and golden-haired, with a laugh that could disarm the devil himself. He was the golden boy, quarterback on the high school team, youth group leader at First Light Church, the son who made his parents' Christmas cards glow with pride. But beneath the Letterman jacket and the easy grins, Alan harbored a secret that gnawed at him like termites in the foundation of his soul. He liked boys. Not in the abstract, passing fancy way the youth pastor warned about during lock-ins, but in the bone-deep, can't-breathe without it way that made his palms sweat whenever Tommy Hargrove brushed past him in the locker room. It came out on a humid Friday night after the homecoming game, when Alan, buzzed on stolen beer and victory adrenaline, kissed his best friend Jamie under the bleachers. Jamie, with his easy drawl and freckles like constellations, kissed back, fiercely, hungrily, before shoving Alan away with wide-eyed panic. "What the fuck, man? You queer or something?" Jamie's voice was a hiss, but his cheeks flushed crimson, betraying the lie. They didn't speak of it again. Not that night. Not the next week when Jamie started dating cheerleader Becky with a vengeance that felt like overcompensation. But whispers spread like wildfire in a dry field. By Monday, the principal had called Alan into his office, Pastor Elias from church waiting like an executioner in the wings. "Your mother's heartbroken," Pastor Elias said, his Bible open to Romans 1 verses 26 to 27, the verses underlined in red like fresh wounds. "But there's hope, son. Redemption. A place where boys like you can find their way back to God's design." Alan's stomach twisted as his parents nodded solemnly across the desk. His father's jaw set like granite, his mother's eyes red-rimmed but resolute. They called it Camp Redemption, a Christian counseling retreat nestled in the piney woods of northern Alabama, far from prying eyes and Atlanta's creeping liberalism. 6 weeks, they said. A summer of prayer, counseling, and aversion therapy to realign his affections. Alan wanted to scream that it wasn't broken, that he wasn't a glitch in God's code, but the shame was already rooting deep, choking his protests into silence. The drive down was a funeral procession. His family in the minivan, Christian radio crooning hymns about surrender, Jamie riding shotgun because he needs to see you're okay. Bro, Jamie, who hadn't met Alan's eyes since the kiss, now clapped him on the shoulder with forced bravado. "It's just camp, dude. Like Boy Scouts, but with more Jesus. You'll come back swinging." Alan nodded, staring out at the blurring billboards for Cracker Barrel and civil rights museums, relics of a South still wrestling with its ghosts. He wondered if this was his ghost now, haunting him before he'd even died. Camp Redemption loomed like a bad dream made brick and barbed wire. Squat cabins ringed by chain-link fences, a central chapel with a steeple that pierced the sky like an accusation, and fields where trust exercises doubled as endurance tests. 30 boys, all between 16 and 20, milled about the gravel lot as buses disgorged them like offerings to some Old Testament altar. They wore identical khakis and polos, name tags pinned like scarlet letters. Alan Whitaker, Atlanta, J. Prayer focus, purity of heart. Orientation was a blur of rules and revelations. Dr. Harlan Graves, the camp director, stood at the podium like a televangelist on steroids, tall, silver-haired, with eyes that bored into your soul like drill bits. "Here, we don't fix you," he boomed, his voice echoing off the paneled walls. "We free you from the chains of sin. Homosexuality isn't who you are. It's a demon's whisper. We'll silence it with God's truth." The boys shifted uneasily, some nodding fervent amens, others, like Alan, staring at their scuffed sneakers, wondering if demons could explain the ache in his chest when he thought of Jamie's lips. That first night, after lights-out prayers that dragged on like penance, Alan met Wayne. It was in the communal bathroom, a fluorescent-lit purgatory of sinks and stalls where the mirrors were taped over to prevent vanity's temptations. Wayne was washing up at the far end, his back to Alan, broad shoulders straining his polo shirt. He was 18, from a nowhere town in Mississippi, with skin like polished oak and hair cropped close, revealing a faded tattoo of a cross on his neck, a remnant, he later confessed, of a gang he'd fled for Jesus. Alan froze, soap halfway to his face, struck by the quiet strength in Wayne's movements, the way his hands moved with a grace that belied the camp's brutality. "You lost, city boy." Wayne's voice was low, laced with that delta drawl that wrapped around vowels like Spanish moss. He turned, and their eyes locked, Alan's blue and stormy, Wayne's hazel and steady. In that instant, amid the drip of faulty faucets and the distant snore of bunkmates, something sparked. Not lust, not yet, but recognition. Two souls adrift in the same storm, clinging to the same fragile raft. They didn't speak much that night, just shared a nod over toothbrushes, a conspiratorial glance that said, "I see you." But as Alan lay in his bunk, the thin mattress creaking under him, Wayne's presence lingered like smoke from a forbidden cigarette. He thought of Jamie back home, probably cracking open a beer with the team, pretending the kiss never happened. The betrayal stung fresh, a prelude to the ones yet to come. Little did Alan know, Wayne carried his own scars. A father who'd beaten the fag out of him with belts and Bible verses, a mother who'd packed his bags for camp with prayers and a one-way ticket. They were mirrors, these two reflecting back the fracture society had hammered into them. The days blurred into a rhythm of torment disguised as transformation. Mornings began with dawn devotions. The boys on their knees in the chapel, reciting verses on fleeing youthful lusts, their voices hoarse from repetition. Breakfast was oatmeal and scripture, lunch a sandwich with a side of small group sharing, where accountability partners confessed temptations and received slaps on the wrist or worse. Afternoons were aversion sessions, the camp's crown jewel of cruelty. Dr. Graves believed in science as much as salvation. Electrodes strapped to wrists, hooked to machines that buzzed with mild shocks whenever deviant images flashed on a screen. Two men embracing. Tender kiss. The zap came swift, a white-hot reminder that love like that was electric pain, not pleasure. Alan endured it all with gritted teeth, his body jerking against the restraints, sweat beading on his forehead as the room filled with the ozone tang of fear. Wayne was in the group next door. Alan could hear the muffled cries through the thin walls, could picture those strong hands clenching into fists. Once, during a break, they crossed paths in the hallway, wrists raw and red. Wayne bumped Alan's shoulder deliberately, slipping a crumpled note into his pocket. "It ain't real. Hold on." Alan read it under his bunk that night by flashlight, the words blurring with tears. Hold on to what? To God, who seemed distant as the stars, to family, who'd shipped him here like contraband, or to the stranger whose note felt like the first honest prayer he'd heard in weeks. As weeks wore on, their connection deepened in stolen moments. During work therapy, raking leaves or mending fences under the watchful eyes of counselors, they'd fall into step, exchanging stories in hushed tones. Wayne spoke of his little sister, Lila, back in Biloxi, who drew him pictures of superheroes to fight the bad dreams. Alan shared tales of Atlanta's hidden corners, the underground clubs where drag queens ruled the night, the civil rights marches his history teacher smuggled into lessons like contraband hope. "There's a world out there that don't hate us," Wayne whispered one afternoon, as they hauled hay bales under a relentless sun. "We just gotta outlast this shit to find it." But the camp was a pressure cooker, and cracks began to show. One evening, during purity pledges, a boy named Tyler broke, sobbing on the chapel floor, admitting he'd snuck a magazine under his mattress, pages dog-eared with forbidden longing. The counselors descended like vultures, dragging him to solitary, a dark shed behind the kitchens where reflection time meant hours without light or sound. Alan lay awake that night, heart pounding, imagining Tyler's whimpers echoing his own fears. Wayne slipped into his cabin after curfew, a shadow in the moonlight, pressing a hand over Alan's mouth to stifle his gasp. "Shoo. We're getting him out." It was madness, a pact sealed in whispers and sweat. Wayne had overheard the counselor's keys jangling during rounds. He knew the fence's weak spot, a rusted seam near the creek. They waited for a storm, thunder masking their footsteps, rain slicking the ground for silent flight. But betrayal lurked closer than they knew. Jamie had called that week, his voice tinny over the camp's monitored line. Hang in there, bro. Mom says you're doing great. Lies. All of it. Unbeknownst to Alan, Jamie had been feeding updates to Pastor Elias, trading secrets for absolution, terrified his own kiss would surface. It was Jamie's tip, innocent, he thought, that prompted the counselors to tighten patrols, to lock the shed doors with chains. The night they tried, lightning cracked the sky like God's own whip. Tyler, pale and trembling, followed them through the underbrush, his breaths ragged. They reached the fence, Wayne's fingers prying at the wire, blood welling from thorns. Alan held the flashlight steady, whispering encouragements, his free hand brushing Wayne's in the dark, a touch that sent fire through him, pure and unshockable. Then, headlights pierced the gloom. Counselors, alerted by a snitch in the ranks. Shouts erupted, flashlights sweeping like searchlights over a battlefield. "Run!" Wayne bellowed, shoving Tyler through the gap. The boy stumbled into the woods, vanishing into the night. Alan turned to follow, but a hand clamped his shoulder. Dar. Graves himself, face twisted in righteous fury. Wayne spun, fists flying, landing a punch that split the doctor's lip. Chaos. Bodies colliding, rain-slicked grapples, the crack of a nightstick against Wayne's ribs. Alan fought like a cornered animal, nails raking flesh, but they dragged him down, zip ties biting into his wrists. In the melee, Wayne broke free, or so it seemed. He vanished into the storm, leaving Alan pinned in the mud, the taste of copper on his tongue. The counselors hauled Alan back, but Wayne was gone, a ghost in the gale. Solitary awaited, 3 days in the shed, darkness pressing like a coffin lid. No food, just water sloshed through a slot, and endless loops of tape-recorded sermons on repentance. Alan curled into a ball, whispering Wayne's name like a talisman, wondering if the escape was real or delirium. When they released him, the camp buzzed with whispers. Tyler had made it to the highway, flagged a trucker who called the cops. Scandal erupted, headlines in the Birmingham News about abuse at Christian camp, lawsuits from Tyler's family. Dr. Graves spun it as a necessary correction, but the board pulled funding, shuttering redemption by fall. Alan's parents arrived in a whirlwind of apologies and tears, whisking him home to Atlanta, where therapy of the secular kind began to stitch him back together. But Wayne vanished. No trace, no calls, just rumors of a kid hitching west, chasing the California sun. Alan searched online forums, scoured missing persons boards, but the trail went cold. Heartbreak settled in his bones, a quiet ache that colored every crush, every fleeting connection. He dated women to please his folks, then men in secret, each relationship a shadow of what might have been. Jamie drifted away, buried in college and a wife named Sarah, their brotherhood reduced to holiday cards. Years passed like pages in a Bible he no longer opened. Alan built a life in New York's Chelsea, a graphic designer with a loft overlooking the Hudson, tattoos tracing the scars from those shocks. He volunteered at LGBTQ+ centers, turning pain into purpose. And then, one rainy Tuesday in a coffee shop, Wayne walked in older, broader, with laugh lines etching his face like victory scars. "City boy," he said, and Alan's world tilted back into place. They rebuilt slowly. Dinners in hole-in-the-wall delis, walks along the High Line where Wayne confessed he'd hidden out in New Orleans, working odd jobs, haunted by the boy he'd left behind. "Thought you'd hate me for running," Wayne admitted one night as they tangled in sheets that smelled of salt and safety. "Never," Alan whispered, tracing the faded cross on Wayne's neck. "You saved me." Love bloomed fierce and full, the kind that withstands blizzards and betrayals. Wayne, carpenter now, built them shelves for books on queer history. Alan designed their invitations, elegant scripts declaring yes to us. They chose a wedding in Atlanta full circle, a reclaiming. Invites went out to the family, including Jamie, who'd reached out years later with a drunken voicemail. "I was scared, man. Forgive me," Alan had, mostly, tucking the hurt away like an old scar. Now, here they stood, on the precipice of forever, and Alan couldn't cross without truth. The microphone hummed in his hand, the crowd's silence a held breath. "Wayne didn't just save me that night," he said, voice steadying as resolve hardened it. "He saved Tyler too. But someone else paid the price. A boy who dreamed of freedom and found only a noose." Gasps rippled anew, his mother's hand flying to her mouth. Father Michael shifted, his collar suddenly too tight. Jamie's face drained of color, recognition dawning like a curse. The chapel air thickened with unspoken accusations, the kind that hung heavy as Spanish moss after a funeral. Alan paused, letting the weight of his words settle, Wayne's thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand, a Morse code of "I'm here." He could see it all again, the storm's fury, the fence's tear, and the boy they'd left behind in the shadows. Not Tyler. Another. His name was Caleb. Quiet Caleb from Chattanooga, with wire-rimmed glasses and a stutter that worsened under scrutiny. Caleb, who bunked below Alan and collected fireflies in jars during rare free hours, releasing them at night like tiny prayers for escape. Caleb, who'd confessed to Alan in whispers one midnight, "I don't want to be fixed. I just want to be me." Alan had held his gaze then, promising silently what he couldn't voice. "You're not alone." Caleb had been the snitch not by choice, but by coercion. Dr. Graves had a way of breaking boys, not with fists but with files. Dossiers of family secrets gleaned from intake forms, leveraged like loaded guns. For Caleb, it was his little brother, institutionalized after a suicide attempt, dependent on church donations that Graves controlled. "Watch your friends," the doctor had murmured during a private counseling session, his hand heavy on Caleb's shoulder. "Report deviations, and we'll ensure your family's prayers are answered." So Caleb watched. He saw the notes, the glances, the way Alan and Wayne's shoulders brushed during labor details. Guilt ate him alive, a cancer under his skin, but fear kept his mouth sealed until the night of the storm. When the alarms blared and counselors swarmed, Caleb froze in the chaos, his jar of fireflies shattering on the cabin floor. In the scuffle, as Wayne shoved Tyler through the fence, Caleb bolted too, not toward freedom, but toward the wood's edge, where the creek swelled with runoff. They found him at dawn, swaying from an oak branch, his body a limp silhouette against the gray sky. Belt around his neck, tied to a low bough efficient. Final. No note, just the stutter silenced forever. The camp hushed it up. "Tragic accident," Graves declared, spinning tales of a slip during the storm. But whispers leaked. A boy so tormented by his struggles, he'd chosen the ultimate surrender. Tyler's family sued, dragging the truth halfway into light. But Caleb's parents? Devout to the core. They buried him quietly in a plot by the church, headstone reading "At peace with the Lord." No questions, no headlines. Just another ghost in the machine of redemption. Alan's voice trembled now, carrying Caleb's name into the chapel like incense from a forgotten altar. Caleb Ellis, 17. He wanted out as bad as we did, but the camp's poison ran deeper in him. He carried our secrets to protect his own, and when it all crashed down, he couldn't carry himself anymore. The words hung, accusatory arrows finding their marks. His mother wept openly, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, while his father stared at the floor, knuckles white on his cane. Aunt Clara crossed herself, murmuring about demons loosed on holy ground. Jamie rose halfway from his seat, face ashen, mouth opening on a protest that died unspoken. He knew. God, he knew. It was Jamie who'd relayed Pastor Elias's updates to the camp board, casual mentions of Alan's progress that masked deeper digs. Heard he's making friends. Hope they're the right kind. Jamie, wrestling his own shadows, had parroted the party line to bury his guilt, unwittingly tightening the noose around necks not his own. I didn't mean, he started now, but Alan held up a hand, the gesture forgiving yet firm. Not you, Jamie. Not entirely. But you were part of it, the silence that lets monsters thrive. The brother sank back, head in hands, the weight of years crashing down. Around them, guests shifted, old teammates averting eyes, church ladies clutching purses like shields, Wayne's boisterous New Orleans family nodding solemnly, their Catholic roots more elastic than this rigid Baptist veneer. Wayne leaned in, his breath warm against Alan's ear. You sure about this, love? We can stop. But Alan shook his head. The floodgates open now. This wasn't just vows. It was exorcism, a casting out of the shame that had shadowed their love from the start. They need to know who they're toasting, he murmured back, pressing a kiss to Wayne's knuckles before facing the crowd again. The story unfolded from there, a tapestry of thorns and tenderness. After the camp's collapse, Alan returned to Atlanta a hollowed husk, his golden boy sheen cracked like cheap gilding. School resumed in fits and starts, hallways buzzing with pitying glances, whispers of that queer kid from the freak camp. His parents tiptoed around him, stocking the fridge with kale smoothies and enrolling him in healthy outlets, karate, debate club, anything to channel the energy they feared. Jamie kept distance, their friendship a casualty of collateral damage. Though he'd slip Alan mixtapes of indie rock under the door, songs about breaking free that said I'm sorry without words. Alan's senior year was a tightrope, A's in AP Lit, where he devoured Ginsberg and Baldwin like contraband, and C's in PE, where changing in the locker room felt like walking a minefield. He came out to his therapist first, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Ruiz with a rainbow flag pin on her lanyard. You're not broken, Alan, she said, her voice a bomb. You're blooming. Those words planted seeds, sprouting into tentative steps. A pride flag thumbtacked inside his locker, a crush on the openly gay exchange student from Seattle who taught him to dance without shame. Graduation came with a full ride to NYU, a ticket out of the South's suffocating embrace. New York swallowed him whole, its subways a vein pulse of diversity, its streets alive with drag brunches and dyke marches. Alan thrived, shedding the khakis for skinny jeans and ironic tees, his hair growing out in waves that caught the wind off the East River. He majored in visual arts, channeling the camp's horrors into canvases splashed with electric blues and raw reds, fences unraveling into lovers' limbs, shocks morphing into sparks of ecstasy. Galleries took notice. By 22, he had his first solo show in Chelsea, wired hearts, selling out to collectors who murmured about queer resilience. Wayne's path was rougher terrain. After fleeing the camp, he washed up in New Orleans' French Quarter, sleeping in doorways and bussing tables at po' joints. The Delta's humid nights amplified his nightmares. Caleb's swing, Alan's cries, the crack of that nightstick on his ribs. He drifted into construction, calluses thickening over wounds, but booze blurred the edges, whiskey shots after shifts. It was a drag king named Remy who pulled him from the mire. "Honey, you're a oak tree in a hurricane. Time to root down." Remy introduced him to carpentry apprenticeships, then to AA meetings in church basements that preached grace without judgment. Wayne got clean at 20, inkling toward faith that fit, a progressive Episcopal parish where the sermons quoted RuPaul alongside Revelation. He built altars for weddings, cradles for queer families, each hammer strike a nail in the coffin of his past. But Alan haunted him. Alan midlaugh, fireflies orbiting his head like saints. Fate, or algorithms, reunited them in that coffee shop. Alan, nursing a flat white and sketching logos on a napkin, looked up to see Wayne ordering a chicory au lait, broad back etched with the memory of flight. Their eyes met, bathroom mirrors fogged with possibility. "You made it," Wayne said, sliding into the booth uninvited. Alan's laugh was watery, disbelieving. "So did you." Dating was a revelation. Dates at Coney Island, where Wayne won him a stuffed lion at the ring toss. Lazy Sundays in bed with beignet and Baldwin essays. Wayne proposed on the Brooklyn Bridge at dusk. Skyline ablaze. Ring a simple band forged from reclaimed wood. "Marry me, city boy." The Hudson whispering approvals below. Planning the wedding was a minefield of its own. Venues in Atlanta to honor roots. Guest lists that balanced blood ties with chosen family. Alan's parents had evolved, slowly, painfully, through PFLAG meetings and a lesbian daughter-in-law from his cousin's side. "We were wrong," his mother admitted over wine one night, her hand frail in his. "Fear made us blind." His father grunted assent. "Don't fuck it up." Jamie was the wild card. Estranged for years, he'd shown up at Alan's gallery opening unannounced, Sarah on his arm, 2 kids in tow. Voice rough. "Therapy too. That kiss. It scared me shitless, 'cause I felt it too. Bisexual. Buried deep. Emerging now in midlife crisis." Alan forgave him then, a bridge rebuilt plank by plank. Inviting him to the wedding felt like tempting fate, but exclusion would have been another betrayal. And now, vows in motion, the past rearing like a leviathan. Caleb's ghost demanding reckoning. "He paid the price for our silence," Alan said, voice rising like a hymn. "The camp's lies killed him, but so did the world's indifference. We can't toast to love without mourning what it cost." The organist struck a chord soft, improvisational, a bridge to whatever came next. Wayne pulled Alan close, murmuring, "Proud of you, always." In the pews, ripples of response. Some fleeing for the doors, skirts swishing judgment. Others leaning in, eyes wet with shared scars. Father Michael cleared his throat, adjusting his stole. "Perhaps." We pause for reflection. Not by half. A pale substitute for the deluge Alan craved. He waved off the priest's gentle intervention, the microphone feedback squealing like a banshee demanding more. "No pauses," he declared, the chapel's acoustics amplifying his resolve into something almost biblical. "We've paused long enough. Let the rain come." Outside, Thunder grumbled, an echo of that fateful storm, as if the Alabama pines had migrated north to bear witness. The guests were a fractured mosaic now. Wayne's sister Lila, all grown with a buzzcut and a rainbow choker, nodding fiercely from the third row, Alan's college roommate, a trans man who'd driven from Philly, fist-pumping subtly, and the stragglers from First Light Church, their faces a war of piety and pity. His mother rose, tentative as a fawn, her silk-sheath dress whispering against the pew. "Alan, honey, please. This is your day." Her voice cracked, pearls glinting like tears unshed. "My day," he laughed, bitter and bright, the sound ricocheting off the vaulted ceiling. "Every day since the camp has been borrowed time, Mom. Caleb's time ran out because we, all of us, chose comfort over courage." He turned to her fully, the spotlight haloing them in gold. "You signed the papers." Dad nodded along. "Pastor Elias preached the sermons that sent me there." "And Jamie," he trailed off, eyes locking on his brother, who looked like he'd aged a decade in minutes, Sarah's hand white-knuckled on his knee. Jamie stood fully now, the aisle between them a chasm bridged by memory. "I was a kid, Alan. Scared shitless. That kiss, it flipped my world. I thought if I buried you deep enough, it'd stay down in me too." His words tumbled out, raw and rehearsed, the therapy speak laced with Southern grit. "I told Elias stuff to make myself feel clean. Didn't know it'd chain you to that place. When I heard about the boy, Caleb, I drank for a week straight. Thought it was my fault." The crowd inhaled collectively, the air electric with half-confessions. Aunt Clara muttered something about the devil's hour, but Lila shot her a glare that could curdle milk. Wayne's grip tightened, a silence steady, but Alan felt the climax building, the story's peak where threads tangled and tore. Flashback pulled him under again, to the weeks after Caleb's accident. The camp, already reeling from Tyler's escape, clamped down like a vice. Double rounds, journals confiscated, trust circles where boys accused each other of backsliding. Alan, fresh from solitary, was a pariah, whispers of suicide enabler trailing him like smoke. Wayne's absence was a void, his bunk stripped bare, rumors swirling, caught by cops in Birmingham, shipped to juvie, or worse, drowned in the creek, body swept downstream. Grief for Caleb manifested in fever dreams. The boy's glasses fogged with rain, his stutter morphing into pleas. "Help me swing free." Alan channeled it into sabotage. Subtle at first, slipping anti-conversion pamphlets under mattresses, copied from a contraband magazine smuggled by a counselor's careless intern. Then bolder. During aversion sessions, he'd hum show tunes under his breath, the shocks sinking to Judy Garland's trill, turning pain into parody. One night, in the chapel's dim afterglow, Alan found a new note tucked in his hymnal, "Not dead. Hiding. Meet at creek. Midnight." Heart slamming. He slipped out, the fence's shadow a familiar menace. Wayne waited, camouflaged in mud and moonlight, a duffel at his feet. "Stole supplies," he grinned, feral and fierce. "We're blowing this joint, for good." It was suicide, pure and simple. The camp was a fortress now, dogs patrolling the perimeter, spotlights sweeping like accusatory eyes. But desperation was a hellhound of its own, nipping at their heels. They plotted in fragments, Wayne scouting weak points from his solitary reflection in the kitchens, Alan distracting with feigned breakdowns during group. The betrayal came swift, a counselor catching wind via Caleb's old files, piecing together the notes. But by then, it was too late. Escape night was clear-skied, stars mocking their peril with indifference. They crawled through underbrush, bellies to earth, the creek's babble covering their gasps. At the fence, Wayne's wire cutters snipped like prayers answered, the gap yawning like a mouth to freedom. Alan went first, thorns raking his arms bloody, then Wayne. But alarms wailed, floodlights bathing them in harsh white. Shots rang out, not bullets, thank God, but salt rounds from the guards' rifles, stinging like hornets. They ran blind, pine needles whipping faces, lungs burning with freedom's sharp tang. Behind, shouts faded, dogs banged distant. They hit the highway at dawn, hitching with a trucker hauling Bibles, irony's cruel jest, who dropped them in Montgomery. From there, greyhounds west, Wayne to New Orleans, Alan homeward bound under alias, a story of early release for good behavior fed to his folks. Separation carved canyons in them both. Alan arrived in Atlanta to a hero's welcome twisted sour. Tyler's lawsuit had cracked the scandal wide, reporters staking out the Whitaker driveway. Ex-gay camp horror, boys' despair ends in tragedy, screamed the AJC. His parents, faces gaunt with guilt, bundled him into therapy, real therapy this time, with a queer-affirming shrink who unpacked the trauma like a surgeon excising tumors. High school ended in isolation. Alan ghosted through finals. Jamie's apologies scrawled on notebook paper. I fucked up, bro. Let me make it right. He burned them in the backyard fire pit, ashes swirling like lost souls. Graduation was a solo affair, cap tassel swinging lonely, his parents clapping from the bleachers while inside. He mourned Caleb with a stolen bottle of communion wine. NYU was rebirth. Dorm rooms sticky with possibility. Professors who saw his sketches as prophecy. He came out loud. Pride parades with glitter bombs and megaphones. Hookups in backrooms that tasted of rebellion. But Wayne lingered, a phantom limb aching in the night. Alan searched sporadically. Online boards for ex-camp survivors. A podcast on conversion therapy where voices echoed familiar but not his. Heartbreak became fuel, his art a bonfire illuminating the dark. Wayne's NOLA years were grit and grace. The quarter's neon haze suited his restlessness, bartending at Lafitte's, where ghosts of Tennessee Williams sipped Sazeracs beside him. He inked over his cross tattoo with a phoenix, flames curling into wings, and joined a queer carpenters co-op building tiny homes for homeless youth. A was his church. Hi, I'm Wayne, alcoholic, survivor of bullshit therapies. Sponsors became brothers, sharing war stories of family rejections and midnight flights. Their reunion in that cafe was serendipity scripted by saints. Alan, sketching a logo for a queer nonprofit, looked up mid-stroke to Wayne's order. Black, strong, like my ex. The barista chuckled. Alan's heart stopped. Conversation flowed like the Mississippi. Camp horrors laughed off as battle scars, dreams voiced without fear. First date. Jazz in the village. Wayne's hand engulfing his across the table. Missed this, Wayne said, thumb stroking Alan's pulse. Missed you. Love deepened in layers. Wayne meeting Alan's parents via Zoom. His drawl charming even as he called out their past. No hard feelings, but y'all owe us an apology tour. They visited Atlanta, touring the camp's ruins. Overgrown lot now a community garden. Wildflowers choking the fence. Redemption, Alan quipped, planting a rosebush. Wayne kissed him there, fierce and claiming, birdsong their only witness. Wedding plans wove them tighter. Wayne insisting on A to Fee at the rehearsal dinner. Alan designing vows etched on oak tags. Invites bore a photo from their first pride together. Arms linked. Rainbows painted on cheeks. Jamie's RSVP came with a note. Honored. And sorry, again. Alan showed it to Wayne, who shrugged. Blood's thicker, but forgiveness is choice. Now, in the chapel's charged hush, choice loomed. Alan's revelation had cleaved the room. Exits multiplying as conservative kin slipped away, whispers of inappropriate trailing like perfume. But stayers leaned in, Lila leading a smatter of applause, raw and real. Tell it, brother-in-law, she called, voice cutting the tension like a knife through butter. Alan's mother approached the altar, steps measured, extending a hand. We failed you, son. Caleb. All of it. Tears carved tracks through her makeup, vulnerability cracking her facade. His father followed, slower, cane thumping like a heartbeat. Proud now, he grunted, pulling Alan into a hug that smelled of Old Spice and old wounds healing. Jamie lingered at the aisle's end, Sarah nodding him forward. I outed myself last year, he said, voice steady for the first time. To the team, the church. Lost some, kept better. He glanced at his kids, wide-eyed in the pews. Teaching them different. The climax crested then, not in screams but sobs, collective, cathartic, the chapel a basin for overflow. Father Michael, eyes glistening, stepped up. Love bears all things, friends. Even this, he raised his hands, blessing improvised. For Caleb, and all who paid dearly, may their light guide us. Wayne turned Alan to him, eyes shining. Your turn, hero. Vows. Alan's laugh broke free, pure as dawn. I do, Alan echoed. The words a vow not just to Wayne but to the ghosts circling the rafters, to the boy in the oak tree and the man who'd run through rain for him. The chapel exhaled, tension uncoiling like a spring long over wound, applause scattering tentative at first, then swelling thunderous, redemptive. Lila hooped, starting a chant of love wins that rippled through the progressive pockets, while Aunt Clara dabbed her eyes, muttering, well, bless his heart. Wayne's grin split wide, that Mississippi mischief lighting his face as he pulled Alan into a kiss, deep, unhurried, tasting of salt and eternity. The crowd cheered louder, cameras flashing like stars approving from afar. Father Michael beamed, his stole askew, launching into the recessional with a flourish. What God has joined, let no one or no camp put asunder. Laughter bubbled up, alchemy turning poison to potion. The reception sprawled across the church hall, transformed into a southern Gothic wonderland. Mason jars twinkling with fairy lights, long tables groaning under fried green tomatoes and gumbo Wayne's cousins had shipped from NOLA. A jazz trio, sax wailing like liberated souls, held court in the corner, while a photo booth captured grins amid props. Rainbow Stetsons, signs reading y'all means all. Alan and Wayne made the rounds, champagne flutes in hand, Wayne's arm a constant anchor around his waist. Toasts flowed freer than the bubbly. Lila's was poetry. To Alan, who turned fences into art, and Wayne, who built the door. Alan's college buddy recounted their first Pride float mishap, glue guns and glitter bombs exploding in fabulous chaos. Even his father stood, voice gruff over the mic, boys tougher than I ever was. To second chances. Cheers erupted, his mother adding, "And to love that heals what we broke." Jamie approached during the cake cutting, kids trailing like ducklings, their faces smeared with buttercream already. "Can we talk? For real?" Alan nodded, waving Wayne off with a wink. He'd join soon, plate piled high with pralines. They stepped onto the veranda, Atlanta's skyline twinkling beyond the magnolias, air thick with jasmine and the promise of storm. "I should have told you sooner," Jamie started, leaning on the rail, his tie loosened like a noose discarded. "About me. After the camp shit hit the fan, I spiraled. Dated Becky to prove something, married her 'cause it was easy. But kids came, and poof. Questions." He chuckled, hollow. "Sarah knew. Held my hand through coming out. Church excommunicated me last Easter. Ironic. Ha!" Alan sipped his drink, the bubbles sharp on his tongue. "Hurt like hell. What you did. Felt like family firing the first shot." Jamie winced, nodding. "Deserved that. But seeing you up there today, balls of steel, bro. Made me want to own my part in Caleb's story." The name hung between them, a bridge of thorns. "You didn't swing the belt," Alan said softly, "but the silence. It echoes." Jamie's eyes welled, and for the first time, Alan saw his brother not as betrayer but as mirror, flawed, fumbling toward light. "Forgive me," Jamie whispered, the question a plea older than their shared womb. Alan pulled him into a hug, bones creaking like old oaks. "Already did. But don't stop at sorry, live it. For your boys." They parted with claps on backs, the veranda door swinging open to laughter and Luther Vandross crooning from the speakers. Inside, Wayne twirled Alan onto the dance floor, their steps syncing like they'd rehearsed in dreams. "You were magnificent," Wayne murmured, breath hot against his ear. "Caleb's smiling somewhere." Alan melted into him, the world's weight lifting in the sway. Around them, the party pulsed, his mother slow dancing with Father Michael, surprising even herself. Lila teaching the flower girl a two-step that dissolved into giggles. As night deepened, stories surfaced like sunken treasures, guests sharing their own scars over cigars on the lawn. An old teammate admitted his brother's conversion stint. The family rift mended only last Christmas. Aunt Clara, tipsy on sweet tea vodka, confessed a college fling with her roommate, hushed for decades. "Thought it was sin," she slurred. "But turns out it's just living." Alan's mind wandered to the aftermath of escape, those liminal days shaping him still. Post-NYU, he'd freelanced for queer mags, Out, The Advocate, his illustrations fierce indictments. Cartoon camps crumbling under rainbow sieges, boys with wings bursting from khaki cocoons. A TEDx talk in Brooklyn went viral, shocked into loving, 500,000 views, sparking emails from survivors worldwide. One led to a documentary, Redemption's Price, where Alan executive produced, Caleb's story the emotional core, archival footage blurred for privacy. His parents' first interview a tear-streaked breakthrough. Wayne's arc wove parallel. His carpentry firm, Bayou Builds, specialized in adaptive homes, ramps for elders, sensory rooms for neurodiverse kids, all with a queer twist. Murals by Alan splashed on walls. They adopted a rescue mutt, Rufus, who snored through their proposals and chased fireflies like Caleb's jars come to life. Vacations were pilgrimages. Provincetown beaches where they held hands sans stairs, New Orleans jazz funerals honoring the lost. Yet shadows lingered. Anniversaries triggered flashbacks. Alan's pulse racing at thunderstorms, Wayne's nightmares of nooses. Therapy was tandem. A couples counselor in the village, sessions ending with walks to Essabagal for locks and laughs. "We're not fixed," Wayne joked once. "Just duct-taped fancy." The wedding's afterglow stretched into honeymoons. A road trip south, tracing escape routes in reverse. They picnicked at the old campsite, now a meadow buzzing with bees, toasting Caleb with bourbon from a flask. "To the price paid," Alan said, "and the lives reclaimed." Wayne kissed him slow, grass tickling their backs, the sun a benediction. Back in New York, life resumed amplified. Gallery shows doubling as fundraisers for conversion survivor aid. Wayne's crew building a community center in Chelsea. The Caleb Ellis House, plaque gleaming. Jamie visited often, his family folding into theirs like puzzle pieces. Barbecues where stories swapped over ribs. Kids asking wide-eyed about Uncle Alan's brave speech. One evening, months post-vows, Alan found a letter in the mail. No return address. Postmarked Chattanooga. "Caleb's mother. Saw your wedding clip online. Thank you for saying his name. He was our light. Snuffed too soon. If forgiveness is a door, consider it open." Enclosed. A photo. Caleb at 12. Grinning gap-toothed with a jar of fireflies. Glasses askew. Alan framed it beside their marriage license. A triptych of then, now, always. Wayne hung it with care. Hammer steady. "Humanity's messy," he said, pulling Alan close. "But damn if it ain't beautiful." In the quiet hours, as city hum lulled them, Alan traced Wayne's tattoos, the phoenix's flames flickering in lamplight. Their love wasn't fairy tale scarred, stubborn, stitched with grace. It was American as jazz riffs over blues, resilient as the South rising from its ashes. And in that, profound humanity, not perfection, but persistence. Not erasure, but embrace. The storm that night was gentle, rain pattering like applause. Alan slept deep, dreaming not of fences, but fields wide open, fireflies leading the way. Years folded forward like an accordion, each pleat rich with the timbre of lives intertwined. Alan and Wayne's Chelsea loft evolved into a haven. Walls papered in Alan's evolving art, abstracts now, softer edges where shocks once jagged. Shelves Wayne hammered from reclaimed barnwood, groaning under tomes on queer theology and civil rights. Rufus the mutt, grayer at the muzzle, claimed the sun patch by the window, his snores a metronome to their mornings. Alan's career crested with a MacArthur grant, genius funds funneled into a foundation. Ellis Echoes, scholarships for conversion survivors pursuing art or advocacy. He keynote at Pride events from San Francisco to Stonewall, voice honed to a blade sheathed in hope. We don't just survive, we sing. Wayne's Bayou builds expanded, franchising to Atlanta. Irony's full circle, crafting safe spaces with murals of local heroes. Bayard Rustin etched in brick, Marcia P. Johnson blooming in tile. Family wove tighter. Alan's parents retired to a bungalow near Piedmont Park, volunteering at the center Wayne's crew built. His mother leading knitting circles for trans elders. His father awkwardly co-hosting movie nights with Brokeback on rotation. Learned more from that sheepherder than 40 years of sermons, he'd grumble, passing the popcorn. Jamie and Sarah divorced amicably, custody shared in a co-op setup that blurred lines beautifully. He came out fully at 42, dating a barista named Theo with tattoos and a theology degree. Their blended brood, Alan's nibblings, filled holidays with chaos. Easter egg hunts in the garden, where firefly jars LED lit, Safe doubled as lanterns. Uncle Wayne's the best builder. They'd crow, clambering over half-finished treehouses. The humanistic heart pulsed in small sacraments. Annual retreats to the old camp meadow, now Ellis Echo's flagship site, a healing garden with labyrinth paths and story circles. Survivors gathered, voices overlapping in testimony. Shocks shared, nooses named, loves reclaimed. Alan facilitated. Wayne cooked the communal gumbo, steam rising like spirits convened. One spring, Lila, now a nonprofit lawyer, uncovered buried files, Dr. Graves, disbarred and dying in obscurity, his therapies fueling a class action suit. Victims, including Alan and Wayne, testified via video, faces shadowed but voices thunder. Verdict, millions for reparations, a public apology etched in federal record. Caleb's parents attended the reading, hands clasped with Alan's, their grief a tide receding at last. He'd be proud, Mrs. Ellis whispered, of the man who remembered. Betrayal's echoes softened but never silenced. Jamie's midlife reckoning birthed a memoir, Kisses in the Dark, co-written with Alan's foreword. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's freeing. It hit bestseller lists, sparking school assemblies where teens traded slurs for stories. Wayne, ever the pragmatist, built a library wing in the center, shelves stocked with copies. For the kids who kiss under bleachers and wonder what's next. Romance endured, deepening into ritual, anniversary trips to New Orleans, where Wayne's family enveloped them in second lines, parasols twirling like promises. They'd dance on Bourbon Street, sweat slick and shameless, then retreat to a Creole B&B, sheets tangled with whispers of still you, always me. A milestone came at 50, Alan's solo retrospective at the Whitney, Unshackled, A Life in Lines. Opening night, the crowd swelled, curators in black, survivors in solidarity sashes. Wayne's toast cracked the room. This man, he didn't just draw the map out of hell. He lit it with love. Applause thundered, but the real ovation was private. Rooftop after-party, city lights sprawling below, Wayne on one knee again. Renew? For the hell of it. Rings exchanged anew, simple gold warmed by decades. Tragedy brushed them still. Rufus's quiet passing at 16, buried under the magnolia in Atlanta, a stone-etched loyal heart. Wayne's diagnosis followed, low hum of prostate cancer, treatable but a shadow nonetheless. Chemo days, Alan sketched bedside cartoons. Wayne as superhero, zapping tumors with cartoon lightning. Payback, he'd quip, and they'd laugh through the nausea. Love the mortar holding them. Remission brought clarity. A will stipulating the loft to Ellis Echoes, a trust for the nibblings. We've paid forward, Wayne said, bald head gleaming under porch lights. Caleb's price turned profit. In twilight years, they mentored, Alan guest lecturing at NYU, Wayne apprenticing queer carpenters. Build straight, love crooked, his motto. Grandkids arrived, Jamie's eldest, out and proud at 16, naming Alan godfather. Christenings blended traditions, Episcopal rites with jazz hymns, toasts to the price paid, the joys reaped. The end came gentle, as such things do. Wayne first, the 78, slipping away in their bed mid-sentence. City boy, that storm. Alan held him, humming the camp's forbidden garland tune, tears salting the sheets. Funeral was a second line through Chelsea, brass band belting Oh Happy Day, mourners two-stepping grief into grace. Alan's coda stretched solo but surrounded. Mornings with coffee and canvases, afternoons at the center, evenings with family orbiting close. At 85, he published Echoes Eternal, a graphic novel weaving their tale, Caleb's jar on the cover, fireflies spelling Unveiled. Launch party packed the house, Jamie toasting, to the brother who dragged me to dawn. In final days, frail but fierce, Alan revisited the chapel, now a community art space, stained glass reframed with diverse saints. He sat in the front pew, tracing vows etched in oak. Alan and Wayne, bound free. Outside, a storm brewed, but he smiled, rain not reckoning, but renewal. As lightning forked the sky, he whispered to the empty air, "We made it. All of us." The thunder answered soft, applause eternal. In that American heartland of hurt and healing, love's story didn't end. It echoed, unchained, into forever.